It is my great pleasure. Hello, hello. It is my great pleasure to welcome here among us Professor Susanne Baer to the ECB, to Frankfurt, and to this conference. Susanne is the leading voice, I would say, in comparative constitutionalism, and she has shaped through her work the way in which we think of the rule of law and the way in which law operates, actually. So we are very, very pleased to have you here tonight, this afternoon. Many of you will know her because she has been a justice at the German Federal Constitutional Court for over 10 years. And she now serves as professor of public law and gender studies at Humboldt University, but also as a global law professor at Michigan University. And I understand currently also a centennial professor at the LSI. So she's very multitasking and multi-traveling. And this is why we're very privileged to have her here tonight. She has combined judicial service with academic leadership across Europe and North America, building also institutions such as the Law and Society Institute in Berlin, and contributing widely to debates on constitutional law, anti-discrimination, and human rights. What stands out is the way in which she brings into interdisciplinary lens what is the law, reminding us that the rule of law is not just a set of formal rules, but actually needs to be lived, needs to be implemented. It's a framework that needs to embrace diversity and dissent, especially in times like those that we are living at the moment and when you are under pressure. Today, I understand that Professor Baer will take us beyond the formal understanding of the rule of law to reflect on its uses and misuses and why the law remains indispensable, not as an obstacle to the function of the economy, but as its very foundation. I'm really pleased to have you here. Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us. Please.
Hello, and thank you very much. It's an honor to be invited to this conference. I profited already from listening to all of you, and you have a full day behind you and many aspects already raised and many experts in the room. So what else is there to say? I want to talk to you, like really you, and call on you to act, because I think it's urgent, it is high time, and yes, coming from me, it may be a bit tricky. Because I know officially you all like the law, are all for it. But to be honest, law is not always your best friend, is it? Some even say that law does basically disturb markets, and good economics would do much better without law. Without law? Not really. So this is either ideology or naivete, and I'm sure you're not into that. So then there is the challenge, fragmentation or fracturing, a challenge to the Verbund, yes. That is certainly no reason to denounce the law, ignore it, or circumvent it, or be overly pragmatic or flexible. You may call for changes, better and sometimes less regulation and coordination. But my point is, when it's there, you treat the law, please, as binding. And even then, some of you in banking sometimes may be a bit unnerved. There's at least the rumor that Karlsruhe was not a favorite term around the ECB for a while. However, when the German Federal Constitutional Court, as biased as I am, decided on the PSPP program in 2021, it didn't talk directly to the ECB, it talked to the ECJ, at least primarily, and insisted on judicial review. Thus, we heard just now, supervision, insisted on proportionality because it is, I quote, of great importance with regard to the principles of democracy and the sovereignty of people. Objections? Criticism? The tone? The argument? Okay. But disagreement is no reason to dismiss a court or constitutionalism or the rule of law entirely. So I want to call on you to defend that independent courts, democracy, and fundamental rights, the rule of law. The rule of law not as formal minimalism, not as purely instrumental to remove barriers from whatever you want to do, but as a substantive foundation of who we are and who we want to be. And so I want to make 3 points. Why does the law matter to us, to you? What is it exactly that matters here today? And what can you and should you basically do? So why does the law matter to you? The easy answer in this building is very short these days. Lisa Cook. The Federal Reserve Governor received a letter last week from the White House to notify her of her dismissal. Endangering sound monetary politics? Maybe. But even more so, the message that no one is safe and that we need law to not have that govern the world. So why does the law matter then to you, to us? The longer answer is that we all need it all the time. How did you get here? The ticket, the passport, all work because there's law to back them up. Specifically, if you do not look like the majority, you want to trust authorities to rely on these rules and not on prejudice or xenophobia, so law really does matter. Or, to get it closer to the room here, why do you trust the chair you sit on not to fall apart? And if so, why do you trust that someone is covering the cost of the accident if it happens, take care of your back pain, after all, cover the hospital fee? These are all laws you rely on. So we do all need them. And why do you think you will return to your office and not be fired, not be removed from your position like Lisa Cook, or the judge in the United States handcuffed in her courtroom? Because there are laws out there and there's supervision and truly independent courts to control government and not serve it. And why do you think markets work if they do? Frank Alderson, member of the executive board of the ECB and vice chair of the supervisory board of the ECB, recently said in the Italian court that, I quote, "The connection between the rule of law and a thriving economy is well established, backed up by several Nobel Prizes in economics, as is the connection of the rule of law and democracy and functioning markets." And he said, "Central banks are a crucial part of this mutual dependence." Indeed, they are. Certainly, not everything is perfect. Greening markets is urgent. Neocolonialism is not just a theory. And the increase of economic inequality, in fact, endangers democracy because it feeds populism. But even more so, law is the instrument to do better and not the thing to be ignored. And if there's no supervision, as was said just on the last panel, it does not work. So as lawyers, people, bankers, academics, whatever capacity you have reason to care for the law. And what exactly does that mean? The rule of law is a very old concept, a sign of modernity it was, replacing arbitrariness and ensuring, last not least, equal liberties. Paradigmatically, the EU is built upon it, in that it was conceived by its founders as a community of law. Walter Hallstein comes to mind. And yes, my mother worked for him as a secretary. My parents met in Brussels, so I'm somewhat into that. But the thing is contested. The classic threat to the rule of law is to reduce it to a mere formality. And this is a no-go. Law is, when reduced to formalism, but a tool. And then it may be used for anything, including injustice. And that is not the idea. Certainly, there are historical lessons in Europe, particularly in Germany, which make this a no-go area. After all, the German Nazis did not only commit the Holocaust, they regulated it, they administered it, they legislated it, they did it by law. And now you think this is a bit too far-fetched? Well, I wish we would be further away from Weimar, but there are indicators that we are not. Take the unmarked armed people dragging people from the streets into unmarked vans these days, driving to unknown places, even despite court orders. There's arbitrariness all over, also in established, still to be called democracies. The world is different today than in the 1920s and 1930s, but purely formal commitments to some law or decree is a threat right now. Please also note that current autocracies are often not based on military coups or violent revolutions, but on legal reform, purely instrumental. They obey the law. The law just looks a little different than fundamental rights, democracy, and all of that. Once in office, having abused our tolerance, autocrats then amend the law and eventually the constitution to undo democracy. When such presidents then say, you may not have to vote again, take it seriously. When such authorities go after the other, refugees, trans people, there is the list, they may come to you too, eventually. So when that one person is fired, be warned. And also note that this is no erosion or natural backsliding or the swinging pendulum. It was better then and it is a little bit now. It will go back. Instead, what we face today is deliberate, aggressive, and smart attacks on our foundations. Democracies do not die, to quote an urgent warning, they are murdered, carefully planned and executed. A frog in a pot of boiling water that doesn't jump. A chicken plucked feather by feather so it doesn't cry out too loudly. There are many metaphors in this world, and there is the reality. The threat today is that autocrats turn things upside down and steal our labels, including rule of law, including democracy, including everything else. Look at Putin's gelenkte Demokratie, Orban's illiberal democracy, which is a contradiction in terms. Take Millet, or take J.D. Vance, getting it all upside down at the Munich Security Conference in a speech lecturing Europeans on what he defines as free speech in a democracy, but de facto defending the free flow of hate and siding with the tech bro new masculinity, last not least. They, in fact, do destroy the rule of law, the l'état de droit, the Rechtsstaat, as the indispensable ingredient of democracies that deserve the label. It is the legal frame and structure of a society governed based on elections that are really fair and free, leading to changes of government that are peaceful. No January 6 in the US, no storm on the Reichstag in Germany, no such other aggressive actions. They are based on a commitment that care for all humans as equals counts, dignity is inviolable, that everyone has a fair chance in life, equality to live the way they want, liberty, the fundamental triangle we rely on. A great idea, living, vibrant, striving democracy, but today carelessly ignored or abused or arrogantly dismissed or snottingly criticized, and most dangerous of all, deliberately undermined and attacked, captured, and destroyed. After 1989, remember, at least in Europe, we thought we got it, right? We were all there. But today, we have all reasons to worry. There's terror, there's war, there are daily atrocities, there's greed, corruption, the world, many people suffer, and the law suffers as well. International law and the hope for a peaceful world order? Well, one, world trade with reliable rules? An illusion? Courts? Talk to judges at the International Criminal Court. They need personal protection these days. Even as a German constitutional court justice, not as important in this world, I was personally stalked, my family exposed, my private life invaded, and I was scared. That's the point. Talk to judges at the European Court of Human Rights. They are really endangered on many levels, particularly after office. In fact, to all those judges that have been called enemies of the people, an example from the UK, or not in tune with what people think, Germany, or a kangaroo court, one of the funnier comments by Trump, or illegitimate by many, many right-wing populists around the world and the like. This is the sound of destruction. It delegitimates institutions, it takes away trust, it destroys the law. Again, this is not necessarily done with machine guns. Powerful actors also ignore laws and the law, thus break it, be it around the competencies or authority conferred upon institutions by law, or be it that they violate substantive limits like fundamental human rights. Some actors cancel contracts, states withdraw from treaties, leave or stop funding multinational organizations, which is all formally totally okay, but a crisis for the whole system. Or take the letter to Lisa Cook. Dear Governor Cook, it says, and it is not simply an order, but an orderly letter, starting with the authority of the president, stating the reasons for dismissal based on law. They want to make it look okay, formally okay. And in the end, it says, I quote, Thank you so much for your attention to this matter. In substance, they break the law. And yes, Lisa Cook is not just any governor, but a woman and Black, which makes her a first target, but not the last one, to be sure. And there's more on that list. But I think you know by now what I mean. The world is not in great shape, nor is the law. And in some contexts, we seem to be nearing a tipping point. So what should you do? Note that the institutions attacked are those that are essential for democracies to work, that they start with who they consider weak and vulnerable, but do not stop there, and that they play with your prejudice and resentment to enlist support. I mentioned courts, I mentioned banks to a degree, at least independent bank authorities, but there are more they target. It starts with politicians and parliaments. And be sure that they enlist you when you are snotty about those, politicians. They have no clue about what they're doing. That's a dangerous statement these days. They hit on independent media as overly woke or not neutral, as well as on education. And note that it is somewhat risky to be very snotty about, didn't they go too far and blah, 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 blah. They also denounce academic freedom in teaching and research. First, they target gender studies. Did you think that was an academic field? Well, start reading, but beyond that, they by now also target medicine and economics and law as well. So be sure the starting points may be, I always thought this was not such a great idea, but the real thing is somewhere else. So there's a strategy behind that. It starts taking some less serious and others not, namely, when people say not too many fundamental rights, only the very fundamental ones, be sure that they will take away your rights as well, because who decides what is fundamental to who? And eventually they target courts, destroy trust, which is very difficult to rebuild, target the legal system, including law firms, as we could see in the United States, hit some, silence others, and eventually also try to get at central banks. It's a planned, funded, and orchestrated strategy. So I think you need to, I call on you, stop it before we reach those tipping points. So don't be fooled. Autocrats hit on the weakest first, and the other to enlist your resentment, our prejudice, but no one is safe. Autocrats also steal our terms. They call themselves democratic or rule of law committed, but their freedom is merely privilege, their independence is service, and their law is but an instrumental tool. So be very clear and frank in your criticism. If measures are illegal, they are not just unconventional, they are illegal. And I think it's time that needs to be said early on. Second, do not delegate this task. It is all on us to act. Some people think it's for politicians primarily, and politics then becomes some consumer version of democracy, a risky reduction because elections are not online shopping. But politics cannot do it all anyways. Some call on courts, especially highest courts like constitutional courts or the ECJ or global courts. This is, pardon my bias, certainly a very good idea because courts are quite special places and are up for the calling. But courts do have their limits. They are responsive actors. They can and do only talk when asked properly. And this is way less than people think. There's also very little room for PR for yourself. Courts are not those speaking subjects. They have limited powers. So even remedial measures are only to a limited degree able to do something about it. So courts are merely referees of games others play or safety belts. They cannot ensure the very basics of their task. So more is needed, including amici curiae, friends of courts in the widest sense. So you may now say, okay, let's wait for education, the law schools, all the academics in the room can do it, and the next generation will fix that problem. That may be too late. We do not have so much time, and let me tell you that those autocratic strategies target education and the academy for a reason very quickly. So there's also not the freedom to act there. So it is on you, the legal community, lawyers. Elderson said that central banks do have specific responsibilities in this context, and I want to add that all of us do, all of you. There's also no time to relax or be, a little bit, ambivalent and waiting and let's see what I think about it. Respect the law, whether you like it or not. This is not the time for an attitude of like, let's see. Whatever it takes. Did I say that? Or pragmatism or flexibility must remain in its legal boundaries. And the binding norms, like the Charter of Fundamental Rights and Freedoms, like the treaties, like all these other norms, are to be taken seriously even and maybe exactly in times of crisis. If not, it may not be you first to be removed, but there are real people that pay the price and you may be second on the list. Do thus not dismiss the law. It is not time for snotty remarks on over-regulation, bureaucratization, judicial activism, constitutionalization, too much, those politicians. Whether you like it or not, do not join the populist chorus that calls for more common sense or ultimately the true will of the people. These are dangerous bedfellows you're joining at this moment. Structurally, it is meant to replace law with some version of efficiency. And this may be very tempting in economics. I understand that. But you surely can withstand that temptation. So criticism of all of this, don't misunderstand me. Criticism of all of this is fine. Doing better is fine. Calls for, better regulation, even less regulation, it's all fine. But snotty dismissals, feeding attacks are not. So last point, talk about it. Do good and talk about it. Alderson said that the rule of law is a critical foundation of the ECB's mandate in, I quote, laying the very foundations for and safeguarding trust in money, be it coins, paper, or digital numbers only, delivering on our mandates and protecting our independence. All right, but not enough. Just as courts need to get better in explaining how they decide to justify the trust put in them, central banks need to explain what they do and why. The homepage is great, everything you put out is great, but there's always room for improvement. Independence is no license for silence. As a justice, I know that very well. As a bank, I think you do too. Independence also includes accountability, both in internal as in external affairs, because such institutions carry so much responsibility. So if central banks, just like courts, are designed to mitigate a time inconsistency problem, and since they navigate in a complicated multi-level system of governments, a Verbund, with courts, just like banks, inextricably linked to each other, we must accept that all check on each other and all must explain what they do really well. So I think my point is very simple. Stand up for the rule of law as an ingredient for democracy, including fundamental rights, and be sure when you talk about it that it deserves the label. And don't be fooled by anyone who wants to grab it from you. It is a good idea to invest in resilience, to counter the populist chorus, to not allow autocrats to enlist you, but explain and defend the law, specifically when it is in your way as well. When there's little enforcement of rules, demand enforcement. When there are too many, revise, but do neither circumvent nor denounce. That's the wrong way. When people criticize rules or courts, fine, go talk about it, argue. But when people attack courts and the law, please explain the concept, the practice, and the stakes to, yes, make courts do better as well as others, but also to defend democracy, the rule of law, including dignity and equal liberty for all. When courts are called overly activist, and imagine what a passive court would be, the job not done, explain the system. Maybe argue for an upgrade, but not withdrawal. No generally lighter touch, but a nuanced commitment to the law and ultimately defend it. When courts are called illegitimate, or just a bit more elaborate, lacking democratic legitimation, or when law or lawyers or anybody working legally is called ignorant or obviously wrong, no clue about the market, etc., explain why lawyers are not bankers, sure, but that bankers are bound by law, and that's what lawyers are very competent in explaining and defending. So defend the rule of law if needed. We are all in one boat because, and I quote Alderson again, Populist, anti-establishment, and anti-expertise approaches that challenge independent institutions, focusing on their lack of direct connection with the will of the people, often fuel general mistrust against such institutions and target them sweepingly. Media, education, research, academic freedom, courts, banks, we all have reason to worry. You're lawyers in whatever function, academics, judges, administrators, experts, legal teams, etc., etc. You depend upon truly independent courts, supervision, sometimes in favor of you and sometimes not, but a constructive part of the legal system, and you are needed now to explain and defend that. In addition, you are all citizens with a voice, and you are needed very much right now to counter these trends. And you are human beings, people with empathy who care, and this is very much in demand. So please do not wait for a devastating but polite letter. The rule of not any instrumental law is indispensable in and for Europe and beyond, for real people. So please act now. Thank you.